Hello, and welcome to my channel, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be reading 4 stories out of The Haunted Canada, The Bloodstain in the Attic, and is based in Calgary, Alberta. Dean House was built in 1906 for Richard Burton Dean, Fort Calgary's Northwest Mounted Police Superintendent. Over the years, the stately house has also served as a railway agent's home, a boarding house, and a gallery and studio space for local artists. But during the late 1980s and early 1990s, many people weren't too comfortable staying at Dean House. And who could blame them? Most of us wouldn't want to stick around a place full of mysterious noises where chairs and dishes might suddenly start flying around and smashing to the ground. But why were such spooky things happening at Dean House? During the time that the building was run down, neglected rooming house, several of its tenants were brutally murdered and others committed suicide. Could it be that the ghosts of these unfortunate souls were haunting the place? Some people thought so. A religious ceremony performed at the house in the mid-1990s seemed to have a calming effect. Dean House was renovated again, and over the years has been transformed into a cozy restaurant with a great view of the Elbow River. But it looks as if hungry diners aren't the only ones who find the atmosphere there welcoming. According to several eyewitnesses, some very strange things still happen at Dean House. Things that suggest otherworldly spirit may still be hanging around. First, there's the matter of the mysterious woman in white. She appears in the attic every now and then. Is she the ghost of a former boarder whose husband stabbed her and then killed himself? Robert Jensen, a Dean House supervisor, thinks she could be. That might also explain the red patch in the attic. Jensen says it looks very much like a blood stain, adding that it changes color from fresh blood red to dried blood brown, depending on what time of the year it is. Then there are the phantoms that open and close doors and windows, toss small items into the air, and grab and hide things when you turn around for a second. Jensen thinks the ghosts of Dean House do stuff like this when they're bored. Apparently boredom has also driven them to make an antique phone that no longer works start ringing as if it were new. And invisible hands have been known to poke at the keys on an old typewriter on display in a small den. Some people think tales of ghosts at Dean House are simply that, tall tales, intend to attract more customers to the restaurant. But when one lunch guest made that point to a staff member, her teacup started drifting up above the table. The woman accused staff of playing a trick on her, but try as she might, she couldn't figure out how they could have pulled it off. The witness felt so uncomfortable working there that she quit after just a few months. Smelling pipe tobacco and hearing laughter in empty rooms made her nervous, but staying around to lock up at the end of the day was even spookier. When she had to turn off the lights on the upper floor and walk downstairs, she felt as if she were being followed so closely that she could feel someone's breath on her neck. After being left to lock up a few times, she decided it was time to start job hunting again. Robert Jensen admits that the ghost's goings-on gave him the jitters at first too. But rather than being scared off, he says, "Good morning, ghosties," when he comes to work, and he ends each day with an equally friendly goodnight to the phantoms of Dean House. Ghost in the rigging. Privateering was a dangerous way to make a living, but it could also be a quick way to make a fortune. When countries were at war, their governments would give permission to some private ship owners to attack enemy merchant ships and claim any loot they found for themselves. Doing this allowed the Navy to spend more time fighting sea battles, and it robbed the enemy of needed supplies carried by the merchant ships. During the war in 1812, several American privateers chased down British ships sailing along the southeastern coast of Nova Scotia. But on June 27, 1813, one of those American ships, the Young Teaser, became the hunted instead of the hunter. A British Navy warship chased the Young Teaser into Mahone Bay, west of Halifax. A British deserter aboard the Young Teaser, realizing that his ship was trapped and about to be boarded by British officers, made a desperate move. Knowing that if they found him, he'd be hanged, he threw a light torch into the ship's supply of gunpowder. The fiery explosion that followed blew apart the Young Teaser and killed many of the crew. Some of the sailors were buried in the nearby town of Chester, and parts of the ship were destroyed by fire, were hauled ashore to be used as building materials. About a year later, a ghost ship made its first of many appearances near Chester in Mahone Bay. Ever since then, hundreds of people have seen a burning ship out on the bay. Some of them were in their own boats when the ships appeared out of nowhere. At times, it seemed to be heading right for them, and they were terrified that it was going to run them down. At the last second, it vanished into thin air. Sometimes it passes so close to the shore that people on the beach can see the sailors up on the rigging. In most cases, the ship appears to be on fire, which is why so many people believe it is the ghost of the young teaser. Over the years, some people have even reported hearing the tortured cries of the men who have been trying to escape the burning ship for more than a century. Lakeside Horror, and it is based in Red Deer Point, Manitoba. It was the second week of March 1898. 5 men, 3 Canadians, and 2 Norwegians had taken the train from Winnipeg to Winnebago station. From there, they have traveled by wagon to an isolated fishing camp on Lake Winnipeg, Pegasus, near Red Deer Point. The camp's buildings were sturdily built and well stocked with everything needed to make men's day a pleasant one. When they arrived, they were looking forward to a week or two of good company and great fishing. By Wednesday, March 9th, they were beginning to think they should never have left Winnipeg. Details of what happened became public when one of the men, a Mr. A.C. O'Byrne, sent a letter from the camp to the Winnipeg Free Press. Strange as the story seemed, the newspaper's editor decided to print it on March 17th. After all, Mr. O'Byrne was well known in the community. He wasn't the kind of person to make up such a terrifying tale and claim it to be true. According to O'Byrne, a loud scratching sound at a window on Wednesday evening was the first sign of some otherworldly force at work. That noise, together with pipes banging and the sound of something being dragged across the roof, started around 9 p.m. and kept the men awake until around midnight. And as O'Byrne pointed out in his letter, we could find nothing to account for these noises, though we did our best to do so. On Thursday evening, a small bell started ringing. At first, its tinkling seemed to be coming from the stable. After a while, it seemed to move closer to the main building, and then right inside. Again, the men couldn't find the source of the ringing. Worse still, the scratching, banging, and dragging started up too. Those spooky noises weren't all that invaded the men's peace and quiet Friday night. That evening, tin dishes were flung off the shelves onto the floor, and boots and overshoes were whipped across the room. A few men from a nearby lumber camp were on hand that night, and they too witnessed the nightmarish sights and sounds. O'Byrne's description of what happened Saturday is chilling. As well as the scratching, banging, dragging, and ringing, O'Byrne told of a heavy iron stove lid being lifted and thrown on the floor, a ladle being tossed out of a pot and then put back in it, and one man's hat flying off a nail onto his head. The paper O'Byrne was writing on was snatched out from under his hand, and the table he was working at began to shake. Around 10:30 p.m., the lamp blew out, and as O'Byrne put it, pandemonium let loose. Everything in the camp seemed to be on the move. Blows on the window were delivered with apparently sledgehammer force. The stoves rattled and shook, and there was also a loud knocking at the door. This happened 3 times, and then gradually the disappearances became less and ceased as usual shortly after midnight. O'Byrne ended his letter with a plea to readers to come up with some sort of reasonable explanation for what happened at the fishing camp. But the best explanation anyone could offer was that the camp had been haunted by a poltergeist. Poltergeist comes from 2 German words, poltern, meaning to knock, and geist, which meaning spirit. The term poltergeist refers to mischievous, sometimes mean spirits that do things like strange noises, shake and rattle furniture and windows, snatch and grab small items, send objects flying around a room. Poltergeists are usually active at night, and after a few days or weeks they seem to stop what they're doing as suddenly as they started. That certainly sounds like what happened on Lake Winnepegasus back in March of 1898. Still, would O'Byrne have thought poltergeist haunting was a reasonable explanation for what he and his fishing companions saw and heard? Who knows? But simply naming the type of spirit that may have haunted the camp wouldn't have made the experience any less terrifying for the men who suffered through it. Poltergeist or not, it had scared the wits out of them. Haunted Hotel, Banff, Alberta. Each year, thousands of tourists from around the world travel to Banff, Alberta, attracted by its incredible natural beauty, and those who can afford often stay at the luxurious Banff Springs Hotel, built high in the Rockies in the 1880s. The hotel offers spectacular views of the snow-capped mountains and the Bow River Valley. Outside it looks like an old Scottish castle. Inside it provides guests with every possible comfort. Many people like the hotel so much that they say they wish they didn't have to leave. Some people believe that a few individuals have decided to stay on forever, even in death. Over the years, there have been several reports of ghostly sightings at the castle in the Rockies. A mysterious bartender is said to occasionally appear at the bar to tell patrons who've had too much to drink that they should call it a night and go to bed. There have also been tales of a wandering bagpiper who might be looking for what he's lost, namely his head, but most reports about seeing phantoms involve the ghosts in particular. The first is said to be a regular at the hotel. He's even been given a name, Sam. While Sam seems to prefer hanging around on the hotel's 9th floor, he's been spotted in many different areas of the building. Guests who claim to have met up with Sam report seeing a man wearing an old-fashioned bellhop's uniform. But Sam doesn't just look like a bellhop, he acts like one too. Always polite and helpful, he's carried bags for guests and opened doors who have locked themselves out of their rooms. But as soon as someone tries to chat with him or offer him a tip for his services, he leaves so quickly it's as if he disappears. Guest descriptions of Sam and his uniform suggest he might be a bellhop who worked at the hotel more than 70 years ago, but no one knows for sure. One thing is certain, though, there's no real person who looks like Sam working at the hotel. The second phantom that several people have seen drifting around the hotel is an unnamed woman wearing a flowing white gown. Hers is a tragic story. It's said that she is the ghost of a beautiful young bride whose family had booked the grand ballroom for a magnificent wedding party. As she started walking down the marble staircase with her new husband to join their guests, she tripped on the long train on her dress. Another version of the story says her gown brushed against candles on the stairs and caught fire, and she stumbled as she whirled around to stomp out the flames. Either way, her husband tried desperately to stop her from falling, but she broke her neck as she tumbled down the stairs and fell dead on the floor below. Does the spirit of the young bride really haunt the hotel where she died? Banff Springs representatives say no, adding that the sad tale was stated as a public relations prank decades ago. But over the years, a few people have mentioned feeling an icy breeze slip past them as they walked down the marble staircase. Others claim to have caught a passing glimpse of a young woman in white coming down the stairs. And while others say that they've seen, just for an instant, a vision of a beautiful girl in a flowing white dress, waltzing along across the grand ballroom. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.